Hello, my name is Crystal Lodovico, and I'm at the Satellite Careers Academy. I'm a science teacher here, and I'm in the SPED 566 class. For my choice project, I chose to interview a special education teacher in my school that I've been working with quite a bit for the last few months through my Practium experience. I'm here with Angela Bucari-Duran. We're sitting in her room right now, and we're going to have a short interview about her experiences in special education, the types of students that she's worked with, and some of the support and advice that she's given students, teachers here at the Satellite Careers Academy. So Angela, thank you very much for agreeing to do this interview with me during this very busy end of the school year.
You're quite welcome.
We're going to start with this first question right here. Why do special education teachers need to work well together or work well with other teachers in the building?
Well, I think it's critical for many reasons. One being that as the special education teacher, I am the keeper of the IEP and pretty much need to inform teachers of students' needs, accommodations, and make sure that those things are being followed through on. It's also important to be able to collaborate because, you know, there may be students in your classroom that require certain modifications, accommodations, so I need to be able to work well with you in that regard. Or even for inclusion classrooms, for instance, in math, I go into the geometry classroom. I need to be able to work, collaborate, and plan well with the math teacher in order to make that be the most effective and productive time for our students.
Are you able to meet with the math teacher in any kind of common planning time, or do you guys meet up during math class for the most part?
That's the hard part with, especially at the Satellite, we do have with our staggered schedule. He's a late arrival, I'm an early arrival, I'm an early departure, he's a late departure. So that part is a little bit tricky, but there are times throughout the day that we can make it work without it being a common planning time, whether it be talking on the way to lunch during our common, you know, we all go to the cafeteria together, so it could be
It's important to be flexible here at this school.
Most definitely. So while we don't have common planning time, we do make time to talk. So that.
Would you be able to think about some of the types of assessments that you've used and explain what types of assessments?
Well, in New Britain, for evaluations, whether it be an initial evaluation or a reevaluation, we often use the Woodcock-Johnson test of achievement, which is a test that pretty much covers most areas that we would want to look at, being reading, writing, math. So that's a pretty comprehensive evaluation that we often use. Sometimes if we need to delve a little deeper into one of those areas, we might use other evaluations, and one that we have used, that I have used for writing is the test of written language, also known as the TOWEL. That's the acronym for it. For math, Key Math is a popular one that we use, and then another one that I often rely on is the GORT, which is the Gray's Oral Reading Test, which kind of delves a little bit more deeply into comprehension as well as fluency and things like that.
I remember looking at the results of one particular student's GORT, and I liked how that was laid out.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much for evaluations and reevaluations, you know, specific to the IEP. I mean, you know that I also do the Read 180 program here.
Yeah, that's right.
So as far as like what do I use as far as evaluations that I use on a more regular basis with a larger group of students, I mean, one that I rely on a lot is the Scholastic Reading Inventory, which is used to you know, determine reading level and growth. So kids who are in the Read 180 program typically have it at least, I try to do it quarterly. You can do it as often as every 30 days just to document how the kids are progressing. Just with the scheduling and how we do things here, it does work out well to do it at the beginning and the end of a quarter.
Okay.
So that's one tool that we use a lot here. Within my program, there's also the Scholastic Reading Counts quiz, which is associated to, again, comprehension and how they're doing with their independent reading books. So there are other evaluations within the program that I rely on and use quite frequently. Those are just a few.
Yeah, that's a lot of examples, so thank you. If you could reflect on experiences not only here, but also in other educational schools that, other schools that you were at, what would be a successful experience that you had with general education teachers, and what would be a challenging experience that you'd had with teachers, not necessarily with students, but with working with other teachers?
Okay. I'll start with that one because it actually reminds me of my first experience in inclusion. So this is about 16 years ago when inclusion started to become more popular. So I went from like a self-contained setting to an inclusion classroom, and had to deal with resistant general education teachers. This was a middle school setting, and I had a teacher who absolutely did not want me in her classroom. So she just didn't see the value in it. She didn't want somebody kind of over her shoulder. People didn't understand what inclusion was like. So it was quite difficult at first, but I kind of took it as I would with a special education student and kind of slowly developed a relationship with her and rapport. And I have to tell you that once all was said and done, she became one of my best friends.
Wow.
And we are still friends to this day, but
Yeah.
That was one of my most challenging times in education, was just kind of making that transition from, more self-contained into the inclusion classroom with a very resistant teachers. I had different levels of resistance throughout my career, but by far she was the most resistant teacher and really did not want me there. So it was cool to see the change, and for her
Change
to
is
become
hard.
accepting and actually value my opinion and value my being there. So that was huge.
Yeah.
That was definitely one of the most challenging. I think one of the most successful and easiest environments has been this one, because I think this program has carefully chosen people who are willing to be more collaborative and work with each other. I mean, you're a science teacher, but you might help a student with an English assignment because that's what we do in our small environment. So I think this has most definitely been the most successful because of how well we all work together and the collaboration that
definitely our colleagues are our teammates and almost our family. We have an SEA family atmosphere here, so that helps out a lot. All right, let's see. Yes, so your most challenging student and how you were able to connect or, break through, cope, and deal with him or her.
Okay. One that comes to mind is actually a student I had here. And there have been, others along the way, but I think they're always very similar in the why. It's about finding the why behind the behaviors. That kind of. The student that I'm thinking of right now definitely was very oppositional to teachers, especially females, I discovered as I started to work more and more with him. But it was more about listening and kind of finding out what was going on. Not when he was talking to me, but when he was in a social setting. And as I listened more, it was always about me maintaining composure. Every day was a new day, even though there were days that he rattled to me. It made it very difficult, but starting fresh every day was very important. But getting to know the why behind the behavior, I think, was critical, because I discovered that his mom had left, and that was kind of the reason he was more rude with a female teacher than he was with some of the male teachers here. So once I discovered that, it was about just being more compassionate with him, and
Okay.
really, I had to work harder at the relationship, but at the end of the day, I think we really did develop a friendship, and he did, I don't know if I would be a friendship, but more respect, and he actually reciprocated that, and by the end,
Yeah.
stated I was one of his favorite teachers, so that was
that's
huge.
awesome. Yeah.
Larkin and I were in the top 2, so it was cool.
Oh, that's really nice. Yeah, with all of the research I've done throughout all these classes, the number one thing is to try and do whatever it takes to get to know your students, and that's like a great
Huge,
example
huge. The
of
rapport building was huge.
why it's important, because maybe that student wouldn't have been as successful if you didn't keep at it every day. Every day is a new day, and I think that's a success story. It really is. All right, last question. Why did you choose a career in special education? Why did you want to work with special ed students?
Well, my journey here has definitely been interesting. I think I've been working with kids in some capacity since, well, it's been a good 30 years. Like, I started at 17. My first job was at the local YWCA, working in the child care department there. So I have worked with kids in some capacity for most of my life, but needless to say, I decided to do, I got my undergrad in sociology and did social work, and was working for DCF probably about 20 years ago. And I thought I was going to really get to make a difference with kids. And what I discovered while working at DCF was that I spent more time in court trying to rehabilitate parents, and not really having that time with the kids. And my most valued time while being a social worker at DCF was my time spent with kids, when I got to take a kid on a field trip from a residential facility, or just my home visits with them. And I discovered that was kind of like the aha moment, like, oh, wait a minute, I need to be working more closely and more directly with kids. And many of my students that I really connected well with, that I really felt that connection with, were kids who had some kind of special need. Many of them were in residential facilities because they were kind of at that really next level of needing more intense services and support. So that kind of led me to special education, because those are the students that I really did connect with. And I had a good opportunity to actually go part-time at DCF and still, pursue my master's in special education. So that is how I ended up in special education. But, kids have been my career for the last, I think
most
of my life.
a lot of us share that same sort of story, where we started working with kids at a young age and just fell in love with that kind of career. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to sit down with me and talk about it. It's actually been really interesting to hear your background. Maybe we could do this with all the teachers here at SCA.
That would be cool.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.